All right, well, welcome everyone. It was so fun for us to start with this A through G video by the school counselor, Mr. Unfree. And thank you so much for sharing that with us. And we will have this in the link that you can access. So in the slide deck, so go ahead and feel free to share that with your students or with others at your school. We're excited for you to be here while we're talking about supporting students' post-secondary readiness and success, how to increase A through G and CTE completion, graduation rates, and more. So we will get started. Whoops, we will not play the video again. There we go. We have an amazing team here from Shasta County. Our Judy Flores is the superintendent of Shasta County Schools. She's in her 5th year in that role and been leading in such a phenomenal way. And we'll get to share about the work they're doing to increase post-secondary readiness and success, and was previously the assistant superintendent of instructional services prior to being the superintendent. And so thank you so much for joining us, Judy. We also have Becky Love. She was formerly working in Shasta County as the first counseling coordinator for the county, and was also a school counselor in that district, and now works as a lead professional learning specialist for Hatching Results. Tara Schurt is the school counseling coordinator currently for the county. She was previously a school counselor in the area and was the 2020 School Counselor of the Year for the county. And Abby King unfortunately was not able to join us, but we wanted to still shout her out because she has some phenomenal work we will be sharing about. She is a counselor at Central Valley High School in Shasta and the 2021 School Counselor of the Year for Shasta. My name is Danielle Duarte. I formerly am a school counselor, formerly a school counseling grant project director and adjunct faculty, and was past president of the California Association of School Counselors. I currently work as the chief of staff for Hatching Results. And for those of you who are wanting to know a little bit more about Hatching Results, we are founded by Trish Hatch, who is our CEO and president. She was the original author of the first edition of the American School Counselor Association National Model, and also the author of the Use of Data in School Counseling text. And really the organization started because Trish was wanting to make transformational change in schools through providing professional learning and consultation to see how are students different as the result of school counseling programs and how can we measure this. And so as you can see, we have a large team of folks that support this work across the state of California and also across the country to provide professional development, to align services, to make sure our services are comprehensive and data-driven. And you can see there's a variety of books down at the bottom too, so that you are able to check those out. There's, in addition to Trish, others of us, myself included, are some of the co-authors on those texts to help you as you're designing your comprehensive school counseling program. Our webinar objectives for today are for us to be able to learn from the successes and challenges of one of California County's work, Shasta County, to increase post-secondary readiness, understanding the complexities of increasing post-secondary metrics, such as A through G completion, when we think about this both within district and county settings and also across different student populations. And for us to also consider ways that we could use the A through G completion improvement funding to support your site or district. And so I'll just share that part of us wanting to lead this webinar was we've had questions and requests. There's this funding out in California and folks have asked, what do you suggest in using these funds? How do you think they could be best spent? And we think it's a really complex answer, but wanted to share first a little bit about the grant and then loop in Shasta to talk about what they have done to help support post-secondary increases across the county over the last several years. So an overview of the A through G completion improvement grant, the purpose really is to increase students' A through G eligibility in California high schools, right? And so the funds are targeted for students in 9th through 12th grade, and the State Department of Education is looking at funding based on CalPADS or the 2020-2021 fiscal year fall submission. And I'll just say all of this information was taken from the California Department of Education's webinar that they recently had, and they also joined a webinar put on by the Riverside County Office of Ed. And so, of course, please double check out all the information, but, but we will have the webinar slide linked in the slide deck so you can check that out from the California Department of Education. So there are 3 types of grant allocations we'll walk you through briefly. There's the access grant. So $300 million is going to students or districts or local education agencies with A through G completion rate of 67% or less. So they're dividing out that amount of money between the sites with 67% or less for the access grants. Local education agencies are getting a success grant if they have a 67% or higher A through G completion rate. And then in addition, there's also learning loss mitigation grants that the funding is to be used for local education agencies to allow students to retake any class where they received a D, F, or a fail if it was an A through G approved course, and if they received those scores or marks during spring 2020 or last school year. So those are the 3 types of funding. And I will say, before we share how access and success grant funding can be used, folks are often asking, what is my A through G completion rate for my district? And what are these funding estimates? And so again, some additional links in the slide deck for you to check those out. And we got those resources from some of the additional webinars we've attended as well related to this, this grant. So funding from access and success grants can be used to provide professional development opportunities to counselors, administrators, teachers, developing comprehensive advising plans and pupil supports, expanding access to coursework to help students satisfy A through G requirements, using it for fees for AP and IB tests. And so again, all of this is looking to have the funding supporting improvement of the local education agencies' A through G completion rates. The education code connected to this funding is requiring that local education agencies complete a plan to have these funding and it would include the 4 following items. Is that how will the funds increase or improve services to allow students to improve A through G completion? What's the number of pupils identified for kids to retake courses? How the plan supplements and does not supplant any funding you've already planned for, and the extent to which all students could benefit and have access to A through G courses. In the slide deck from the California Department of Education webinar, there is a link or an example plan, and I believe that official plan will be sent out if you want to join the listserv for A through G. You can see the website, you can see the email address down here, and they ask that the plans are developed by April 1st, and then they do have to be board approved as well. So before we jump into Shasta, we did want to talk about, what's really unique and exciting about this funding is that it allows districts to think really carefully about how to address this work in both the technical challenges that are preventing students from completing A through G and also the adaptive work. And so when we think about solving, this technical piece, that might be providing extra tutoring and professional development and some types of thoughts about, what are additional A through G courses we can align. So it's like information or like kind of an input of things for transformational for technical challenges to be addressed. But we know that this work is really complex, and there's also adaptive work that needs to be done. How do we shift mindsets in as folks are thinking not everyone needs to complete A through G, and share about how, even for the military, how there's such a benefit for students to have advanced coursework, for example. Or how do we shift systems that are not allowing all of our students to access A through G aligned courses at the same rate? And so as you're thinking through what Shasta is going to talk about, think about both the technical and adaptive and how this funding can help support in both of those ways. And so now I will turn it over to Judy Flores to talk about Shasta County's work in supporting students' post-secondary readiness and success. So thank you, Judy, so much for being here.
Okay, perfect. Well, good morning, everybody. Happy to be here. Before we jump into Reach Higher Shasta, Shasta County, I want to give you a little bit of background. Shasta County is approximately 4,000 square miles. So if you were to take all of Delaware and all of Rhode Island, we're bigger than the two of those combined. And so within that large area, we have very few students. So I came from Hayward Unified, and in Hayward, we had more students than in our whole county combined, and yet we have 25 different school districts. 4 of those school districts have high school students. And across our county, we have 60% free and reduced lunch. So over the course of this initiative that we've been involved in, it's one component of Reach Higher Shasta. Reach Higher Shasta is a cradle to career initiative that really looks at how do we help every student graduate from high school with every option still open for their future. And so all of the comprehensive high schools in the county have been involved in this work. And we really put together a model that I think has worked well to see the results you'll see in a little while. So this work, I reached out initially, and we'll dig into this a little bit more in a few slides, but as we think about who was involved in this work, all 4 district superintendents who have high schools were involved. The dean at our community college was involved. We have site principals, assistant principals. We have a person at the county office who works with administrators, available as a coach. As Danielle mentioned, we have a counseling coordinator. Becky Love was in that position for 5 years before retiring, and now Tara's in that position. We identified a counseling co-lead at each school, and we'll dig into why that became so important. And then, of course, all the counselors were involved in the training. So as we think about our challenges, go ahead and just put all of these up. Our closest CSU is an hour and 15 minutes away. And so it creates some hurdles as we think about A to G completion. The question becomes, we have a community college right in our backyard. And so why do I need to complete A to G? Because we have that barrier of distance. Another barrier for us, or a challenge, has been that only 22% of adults have earned a bachelor's degree, as compared to 33% across California. And so there also is that question mark in the minds of many adults as to, why does my child need this? I got by just fine without it. We also have, as I mentioned, 60% on free and reduced lunch. And I'm sure many, if not all of you, are familiar with ACEs. About 40% of our students report having at least 4 ACEs, which is significantly higher than the statewide average. Next slide. So as we think about our journey, where this all started for us was with a Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation opportunity. And this was put out back in the fall of 14. And so I brought together a group of high school administrators and said, as you think about the needs in our county, let's really brainstorm what would be those greatest areas of need. So that took place in January, and then we began to gather data, and I'm going to get into that in just a minute, but we didn't want it to just come from our administrators, but we wanted to gather data from school staff, from parents, from counselors, as well as from students, in order to determine what we would apply for. So then we submitted the planning grant. Actually, we're funded by the Gates Foundation for that planning grant. And once receiving that grant, we really jumped into working with this structure of a co-lead. You can continue to advance. And co-leads at that time were from each district. So each one of the 4 districts with high schools. So I had them attend with me the California School Counselors Association conference. We then expanded that through conversation to say, we need to really look at co-leads from every school site so that every school site has that opportunity for two-way involvement, both the communication to, but then input from. And so we expanded to include counseling co-leads from each site. And then we really reached out to learn from other places who are doing this work. We wanted to really dig into what Riverside's been involved in. Mark Lenore used to be at Riverside, and we met with him as well as with others to really understand best practices that were in place that we could learn from and draw from as we built out what would be a 5-year plan. In that spring, we found out we did not receive the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation implementation grant, but timing was perfect for us because the state put out college and career readiness block grant funds that were for a 3-year window. And our district superintendents were so bought in due to all the work we had done that they said, we will put forward our money toward what we were going to fund with the Gates funds in order to see this work actually expand and actually have the ability to continue. So in that first year, in 16-17, we had collaboration across sites. We began to look at what would be that common data that we would measure. We branched out into a junior transcript audit, all by hand that first year. We began to share best practices across school sites and it came up with this very first opportunity for people to meet across districts. And for some of you from large districts, it's a very different conversation, but some of our high schools are so small, they may only have 1 or 2 counselors at their school. And so this became a great networking and collaboration opportunity to work together. And in the spring of that year, we had our very first Hatching Results professional development, which then built into 10 days of training over 2 years with Hatching Results. Becky Love is our counseling coordinator, worked closely with the co-leads, and we'll talk a little bit more about that in a minute. But following that 3rd year, we had the opportunity to apply for and receive the California School Boards Association Golden Bell, which was a great celebration of the work we had been involved in and the data we were seeing as a result. So then we moved into years 4 and 5, and you know the pandemic kind of put a wrench in that. But where we wanted to spend our time was really in implementing what we had learned through the training we had received. So I want to go back to how we decided on where we would focus. And so in those input sessions, this was the question that I was asking of everybody. Why do we have half of the state's average percentage of A to G completion? What are the reasons? And so those Post-its that you saw, everybody wrote their own, right? And we started with just administrators. And from those Post-its, we began to group those Post-its. And what you see on this fishbone diagram are the groupings of Post-its. We had 7 different groupings of reasons as to why. And we said, all right, well, now we have that perspective. What do the counselors think the answer to that question is? Why do we have half the state average? What do parents think? What do teachers think? What's the student perspective? And we didn't want to lose track of who said what. And so we color coded it. So the blue really represented administrator perspectives, the counselors you'll see in green. And sometimes we had groups say the same thing. And so those are listed in one of the colors. And so after we went through this whole process of really getting a fairly complete picture of why we're half the state average of A to G completion. And by the way, we didn't even know what our CTE completion rates were. Didn't even have that data when we started. But we identified 4 areas of focus, and those are the 4 bones in the fishbone that are highlighted in yellow. And we'll get into those in the next slide. Okay. So we entitled our initiative, School Counseling Initiative, the tagline, every student, every option, is for Reach Higher Shasta as a whole. And we really saw the power in that in our focus with school counselors. So using the improvement science approach and really working within that, we came up with an aim statement. And that aim statement, we wanted to encompass more than A to G, because you saw our our data with adults who have bachelor's degrees or higher at 22%. And we knew we needed to have a more complete picture of what this looked like to really think about success following high school or preparedness following high school using both a combination of A to G and CTE. So our aim was Shasta County students are equally or better equipped to compete with students across the state in terms of preparedness for post-secondary options by completing the A to G sequence of classes and or a CTE pathway. And here's another way in which we have taken a look at this, and this has been kind of our slide as we've moved forward with that. And we really focused on 4 areas, so you can advance to the next slide. And as we look at these components, we knew that we really needed a systemic approach to school counseling. In our county at the time, every counselor approached counseling in their own way, even in the same district, even at the same high school. And so looking at a systemic approach to school counseling was so critical because we wanted to make sure that every student, no matter who their counselor was or what school they attended, had the same access to information, the same knowledge, and the same skills to prepare them for life after high school. And so that became a critical piece of what we were doing. And so we also knew culture was so important. As we think about post-secondary options, the culture within our staff, the culture within our parent community, the culture even within our students themselves, in order to think about options and really be open to all options upon leaving high school. We also put as one of our focus areas in that very first year was to increase communication with families and students, and had several ways in which we were doing this, both in terms of common presentations that would be done for families, as well as common lessons that would be done with all students. So our implementation model in the years 2 and 3, we brought in Trish Hatch and several from Hatching Results for 5 days in year 1, 5 days in year 2. And I really led this work from the top. I said, you know, I'm going to be at all 10 sessions, which then guess what? Every one of our district superintendents followed suit, and they also were at all 10. One of the things I've learned through my time involved in professional development is if we as leaders don't set the example and really know and understand this work, it's hard to then follow through with it. It's hard to check in with those who are implementing if we don't really know it well. And can support and then apply it in our local context. We had district administrators then identified who on each school campus, sometimes that was the principal, sometimes it was the assistant principal who worked most closely with school counselors, and they also attended all 10 sessions. And then we made it the expectation, or you can say requirement, that all high school counselors in the county attend. I couldn't make that decision, but each district did. And so what was powerful is not only did we all attend, but then we had Becky Love in this role of counseling coordinator, who after session 1 and 2 would then do all of the work with our school counselors to then follow through to make sure that by the time we got to session 3, we had done quite a bit of follow-up and really were ready for that next training session. And so Becky worked as counseling coordinator in coordination with the co-leads, both to get input from all the counselors on their site, as well as to take feedback and have that feedback incorporated in the next training session. And so that became a very powerful piece. In addition, as counseling coordinator, she helped to gather countywide data, and we would show countywide data. You'll see some of it later. But not only did we look at countywide compared to statewide, we looked at individual high school data and made it a safe zone. It wasn't used for judgment, but it was really there to learn from each other. And then our high school counseling co-leads met monthly with our counseling coordinator. They facilitated meetings on their school campuses between counselors, as well as meetings with counselors and site administrators. And all of that was taking place just in the training realm, right? To follow through and implement on that. In addition, there are other pieces that were taking place, right? We had countywide PSAT taking place in 8th grade, so that we had a common measure moving into high school, because we have 21 districts that are feeding into high school, 4 high school systems, and needed to have greater alignment in terms of what those common measures would be. We also work closely with ARIES in order to develop some ARIES analytics dashboards that were really helpful for us, both in the data review at the site level, district level, and county level. Becky, as counseling coordinator, worked closely with district registrars to get common practices and ways to look at uploads and to make sure information was accurate. And then we had countywide review of data across high schools. This just gives you an overview of the trainings that took place with Hatching Results over the 2 years to really set the stage for the work that we were involved in. And as I mentioned, in year 1, if I were to just kind of take that big picture, we really dove into the idea of giving common lessons to all students by grade level. Right, so some lessons were for 9th grade, some were for 12th, different lessons across the 3 different domains to really make sure high school students had what they needed to be successful and weren't reliant on one-on-one meetings with school counselors. In year 2, we really delved into tier 2 interventions and looked at the data that would be used to determine which students were in need of those interventions. So I'll stop there, but we've shared this with our board on an annual basis, and as we look at that across, you can go to the next slide. Our board has been firmly behind this, and one of our board members, Kathy Berry, made the comment that resonated so much with the co-leads who came to present a couple of years ago to our board. And she said, your work is not only impacting the lives of our current generation, but future generations as well. So great quote, and want to end my section with that.
Thank you, Judy. Excuse me, that quote did resonate with all of us, and we just looked around and we had chills, goosies, if you will. So we always appreciate that big quote from our school board member. It has been my pleasure to be the counseling coordinator for the Reach Higher Shasta School Counseling Initiative, and I'm going to be sharing some results and some practical applications. So we did work with Trish Hatch, Danielle Duarte, and Whitney Triplett. We learned about the Ask a National model, which wasn't really common knowledge to us. I'll be very transparent. So there was some learning there about our national model. And then we learned about MTMDSS, multi-tier, multi-domain system of supports, which is really inside the delivery component. The MTMDSS really resonated with all of our school counselors. It made sense. It was easy to apply. And that's where we made our greatest gains, is focusing on that MTMDSS. Some strategic actions on my part. I just want to give a shout out to these. I spoke a lot about the social determinants of health when I was working with school counselors. That made so much sense to us, and that education is the largest social determinant of health. And when we talk about that, it means education is going to influence where our students will be able to live when they are adults, what the level of crime is in those neighborhoods. And of course, you know, as we know, medical benefits and salaries. But really, when I started talking about social determinants of health, that resonated with school counselors, and we saw a swing in motivation about why A to G is important, that it's not just for those students going through a 4-year, but for everyone that is able to complete A to G. It's a best practice. We did a lot of teaching around school counselors can do A to G overrides in their school information system at the end of the year, because we had some systems that didn't really have clean data to recognize our community college classes for A to G. So we had to clean that up, and school counselors actually manually overrode their system to give, like Becky Love, the student, oh, she took history at the community college and our system didn't pick that up. Ding, Becky Love is CSU eligible. And so that helped our data immensely. We reviewed A to G validations. Anybody that's intimately involved with A to G and keeping track of all the validations, we know that it's ever changing and you have to keep it ever present on everyone's minds. And so we did that in our school counseling monthly sessions. We would review different transcripts and different scenarios and kind of validate our knowledge. And then the co-leads would also validate those scenarios with the counselors on their campus. One of the more impactful actions we did is I asked Judy, can you convene a meeting of our superintendents, our directors of curriculum, and our district registrars, because some of them know some of the most current practices and some know other current practices, but we didn't have anybody that knew everything. So by convening them, now we had a great platform where they were helping each other, and it was now district registrars could reach across the county and contact someone to get an update or help or support, because now they knew each other. That was really important. That meeting really was impactful. Capturing clean data. I could go on and on about that, but making sure your data is clean, that you're uploading to CalPads. Making school counselors aware of their data and where to find their data. We found that some school counselors didn't know about DataQuest, and they weren't too sure how to manipulate the data, and they didn't really actually know when the data was final and going to be uploaded to the state. So that was important. We made a common A to G flyer that we marketed from 6th to 12th grade around our county, because as Judy said earlier, our family communication was lacking, and that's what we found in our fishbone. And so that was one of our focuses, is keeping information current and common, so that they didn't, every time they saw A to G, it didn't look different. Always, always, always sharing best practices. And on that, I want to give a shout out to Catalina Cifuentes from Riverside and from Dr. Vanessa Gomez at San Jacinto. I leaned in heavily to those two brilliant women, and they were very generous with their information. And so those systems really helped us a lot. And then last but not least, celebrating large and small successes far and wide. Anytime I could get on the stage or get the mic, I was always talking about what our school counselors were doing and how we were making progress. So Judy's laughing because I was very intentional with, I'm ready to speak. Just give me an opportunity and I'm going to share what we're doing. And then last but not least, always giving credit where credit is due. That was so important. And anyone that's a leader, you understand what I'm talking about. Being a multiplier in my leadership style was essential to our success. And speaking about our success, you're probably wondering, well, these people are having a webinar, what was their success rate? So over our 5 years, we did make 21% increase. But look at that increase from the first year. We went from 36.2 to 41.8. Super like impactful, that the clean data, the validations, and the registrars, that made a big difference. So although the state was at 50.9 in 2020. Look at our dramatic improvement compared to the state. We're very, very, very proud of this data because we're making a difference for our students in Shasta County and their determinants of health. We also measured our CCI. The dashboard came out not long after we started our initiative, and look at the progress that we made as compared to our state. Our school counselors and administrators, by the way, the school counselors can strive, but we cannot thrive without administrative support. And that's a direct quote from Dr. Trishak. So thank you to our administrators for supporting this work. And we're very proud, very, very proud of our work. And as you can see, before the pandemic, we got all the way up to 71.7% in CCI prepared for our Reach Higher consortium. We also started measuring CTE because if you recall, our measurements were CTE and/or A to G. So check that out. We made dramatic improvement. The first year, the state and Shasta County were struggling with the measure, but from 18, 19, and 20, those are right off of the dashboard and the special report. We also had a FAFSA initiative, and Judy sponsored a countywide competition. And look at that, even in the pandemic, in year 2021, the class of 2021, we got up to 71%, which is phenomenal because the state remained at 50.8. The state actually declined, and we achieved more because we are Reach Higher Shasta. So 74% of an increase in that first year. Wanted to give a shout out of that. I'm going to turn it over now to Tara Schwert, our 2020 School Counselor of the Year and our counseling coordinator for Shasta County.
Good morning. Thank you. I'm really happy to be here. Yes, some people in this role, they ask me, where I work and what do I do? And so I tell them I'm the county school counseling coordinator. And of course, their response is, oh, you're the new Becky Love. And so I have big shoes to fill, but I'm really happy to be doing this work with all of you and with the county office and carrying the torch forward. So I think that as we were going through this whole process, I got to be a co-lead, which really was by default. The other counselors on my site said, oh, make Tara do it. She's the new person and she can be the co-lead. And I'm so grateful because the amount of learning that I did and the results that we were able to push our school forward was just tremendous. So one of the hugest things that I believe was such a significant change for us as school counselors was moving from the guidance counselor world, and really becoming full-fledged school counselors and really making sure that we were following our professional competencies the way that ASCA would ask that we do. And so, in the old guidance counselor world, there was a lot of reactive counseling. We were only really serving some students. This is hurts my heart to see that these were the things that were happening, right? But we can say that we've moved over. So now we're engaging proactively and doing preventative counseling by getting into the classroom. We're serving all students, right? Our role was really loosely defined in terms of what do school counselors really do? A lot of people on our campus, there was mystery around it, right? They didn't really clearly understand. So now we have clearly defined roles and we share that with people. We let them know what it is that we do and invite them to the things that we're putting on. And our focus was mostly on counseling services that we provided, right? So it was almost like random acts of counseling. Like, what do we think that our students need without really doing the data to figure out what they truly needed, right? And so now there's a focus, there's measurable student impact. We really look at the data to push our programs forward and know that that's what we're really needing to offer for them. Some other things from our guidance counselor days, I say, is we really worked in isolation we didn't really communicate very much with other school counselors to serve students. Maybe within our site, we had a lot of collaboration, but not, with other sites and certainly not outside of our district. And so now I really believe that we we are collaborating a lot more among schools, and they may not even be in our district. I know that I can call, Central Valley High School and call up Abby and say, I need help with this. And they're a completely different district on the opposite end of the county, but there's that collaboration that's happening within the county among school counselors. And, we didn't realize this, but we were gatekeepers of rigorous courses, right? Sometimes we had this system set up that kids had to meet a prerequisite to get into a certain class. And so we've really pulled back on those things so that all students have access to rigorous courses. Should they want it? Should they, advocate for that? And we can even say, have you ever thought of taking honors, US history? I think that this would be a great fit for you. What do you think about that? Do you want to try it? Let's give it a go. We'll give you lots of support. And there wasn't a lot of accountability for what we were doing. We weren't really tracking data or tracking results. And so now I feel like there's a lot more accountability about our student success. We were mostly helping the college track students plan for college. And now we advise all students for multiple pathways. We celebrate, like, whatever it is that your post-secondary plan is, we're going to celebrate that. We just want everyone to have a plan. And so we are going to help them achieve that, whatever that looks like, and make sure that transition is seamless for them. And we're spending a lot. Oh my gosh, this was like the biggest change, right? We were spending so much time in tier 2 and tier 3. It was like an ER in our building, and you're just like plugging one hole to another. You're just really trying to keep the doors open and keep kids moving in the right direction, but it was exhausting. And so now we're spending a lot more time in our tier 1, and it's so refreshing because we can get out into the classrooms, serve all of our students, and it doesn't feel like this emergency room all this. Well, I can't say that this year maybe doesn't feel like an emergency room all the time, but in general, it was such a huge shift in our time saving, right? So that was the biggest thing that I felt was such a great change that was happening on our campus. And we can go to the next slide. And I think this is Miss Becky Love.
Thank you. So thank you, Tara, and thanks for sharing your passion. Your passion for school counseling just resonates out of your voice. These are our tier 2 data elements that we agreed upon across the county. So remind you, this is not one district, this is a county. So in a room full of superintendents and directors of curriculum, principals, assistant principals, and school counselors, we came to these agreements. And I want to call out just the A to G that we wanted to focus on students that were off track by 10 or fewer credits. And we would do that every semester, 9 through 12. We use our Aries analytics, which Tara will be talking about in just a little bit more. We have a very fancy Excel chart that helps us hone in on those students that are off track. We also implemented, our intervention was that we implemented an A to G opt-out form, and I'm not gonna be bashful in saying we copied it from San Jacinto, and we appreciate San Jacinto High School sharing that opt-out form. We just put our label on it and we use it. And we do attribute that A to G opt-out form for part of our success, most definitely. So those were our tier 2 data elements. And we, again, talking about the why, if you can collect data from your community college, we are fortunate. We only have one community college that our students matriculate to, by and large. We have an MOU with our community college, and because we can share our transcripts of who was and was not A to G eligible, sharing that information is key. We were able to determine that 81% of the students that were A to G eligible successfully passed their first transferable college English course. And we appreciate that data because we can use this data to, introduce this information to our 8th grade students and continue on through high school, and that if you are going to a community college, it is still in your best interest to be A to G eligible. And here's the data to explain why. So 67% of the students that were A to G eligible passed their first math college class at a rate of 67%. as compared to 48% of those students that were not A to G eligible. And we think that's very, very telling of the importance of A to G. And it helps us when we're combating the mindset of, oh, I'm only going to the community college. Well, do you want to be successful there? Do you want to be able to transfer within 2 years? This is the data that helps us tell that story. I mentioned earlier that we had a common A to G flyer. We made this and then it was updated to show like what the UC requirements or CSU requirements are. We always know that UC requires just a little bit more or encourages more. So this would be hanging around in middle school classrooms and in high school classrooms and high school counseling offices and middle school counseling offices, trying to share the same information everywhere where it wasn't something new or different. And if you'd like a copy of that, it is linked if you, the image is linked. So that was an important piece. And then this year, Tara Schwert had another great idea. She made these flyers for teachers all across the county to post in their room. And then once they get the poster, they just check which one of these characteristics is telling of their story. What's their story? And then that helps facilitate some conversation, especially if you're a first generation college graduate. So remember, when we started this, our community of formerly with a bachelor's degree was only 22.5%. So many of our students are first generation college students. So this is a great conversation starter. It was brilliant on Tara's part. Much appreciated. As I spoke about earlier, this is our A to G opt-out letter that we copied from San Jacinto. It's basically saying statement from the principal, from the school counselor, how important A to G is, and that we encourage students to be A to G eligible. And so it's more than just sign the schedule change. They actually have to sign this letter that they have read it. And it's just, you know, it's one more effort to say how important A to G is. So before I go any further, I just want to say Tara Schwert and Abby King are extraordinary counselors. And that's why Tara, excuse me, Tara was our first Shasta County School Counselor of the Year. And guess what? Abby King was our second School Counselor of the Year. So Abby is from Central Valley High School and Tara is from West Valley High School. And then there you see our state in the gray. And so look at that improvement from first year 2016 to 2020. We don't have the 2021 aggregated yet, but Central Valley High School increased 58.5%. West Valley 60.6%. Let's call it 59% and 61%. Phenomenal. Round of applause. I also want to give a big shout out because if you remember when Judy started speaking, our aim was to be equally or better prepared than the state. And I want to give a shout out that Tara and her team, her school counselors and her administrator for the class of 2020, they equaled the state. Huge accomplishment, starting at 31.7%. And that was when we first started making interventions. They were at 31.7%. So thank you, Tara, for your work. Thank you, Abby, for your work and your teams and your administrators. So Tara, why don't you tell them about some of your fancy practices that you implemented?
Yes, thank you. So one of the perks of being at the county office is my CalPads people get a little preview for the 2021. So there's some good things coming for 2021 CCI. So I got a little preview in there, but I couldn't put it in the slides because it's not public. But anyway, I'm just super excited to be doing this work. And you know what? I really want to say that anyone can do these things, right? Anyone can implement these things on their campuses. And it really just comes down to strategic planning, right? We were in the classrooms more, yes, but I wouldn't say that we were doing like tons and tons and tons of more work, right? We were just really strategic about the work that we did. And one of the things that we implemented was this transcript evaluation. And we do this countywide now. It's just a common practice that we do. And what we do is we as many of you guys do your transcript evaluations, but we really wanted to give our students specific feedback about what they needed. So when we do our transcript evaluations, we actually have these digital stamps. So this is just a PDF. We create these digital stamps, and based off of what the students need, we will put the digital stamp on their transcript when we give it back to them and review it with them. I love what Enterprise High School did. They actually incorporated some QR codes to take them directly to some things that they needed. So it was either the SAT, ACT, or, you know, if a student was going to Shasta College, they could actually make an appointment with our local community college. And then with just the A to G requirements, they're just saying, keep it up, good work. You've met all of these, right? So just a really simple way to give them feedback and be really intentional about what the students were needing to do, right? So that's something that we all do now. Some of them use labels and they stick it on there as like kind of labels that they pre-print. Others do these digital stamps. So, and another thing that we started using was in conjunction with Aries. And I know Becky actually had a lot to do with this because this took a lot of deep digging with Aries. We worked directly with Aries to develop dashboards for some in our Aries analytics. And so what we really wanted to be able to do was to create a dashboard for every single category for the A to G subject areas. And then that way we could see in real time through our Aries analytics, how many students were on track, how many were missing 5 to 10 credits, who were missing more than that, and then who had no credits in certain areas. In this case, it's the English area. And so we had a dashboard for every single category. And what's nice is with those Aries analytics, if you have Aries analytics, you can click on the chart and it will specifically give you the student names. Like these are the students who are 5 credits, you know, lacking in English. And then you can be really intentional with that. So it's a good resource. So within that, we developed a way with Shasta College to do these transcript audits, because as you know, you might, you know, that's great that you could look at every transcript for some of you are probably going, well, that's great. You know, for caseloads of, you know, less than 400, that might be an option. So with caseloads that are larger, we developed this tool through Shasta College, our local community college, in conjunction with them. And they looked at our Aries analytics dashboards and we said, we really need a way to be able to pull this data into a chart so that our students, it would give us all the students in one area in every single category. And then it would be color coded based off of what they're missing. So we are able now to pull that information from our Aries analytics into this fancy Excel sheet, and then we can sort it. We can say, you know what, who are all my students that still need a visual performing art? Because they're juniors, going to be seniors. And if they still need a visual performing art, I better make sure that that is on those student schedules, because so it's just a really good way to check for your students. We do this with our sophomores as well, going into junior year. How many of our students still need foreign language? Because we don't have very much time left to get that in. So we can do it by grade level. We can, you know, you can run it for your whole school, you know, 10th through 12th, and start looking at grade level and certain things like that. So we use this every, I usually do it in the fall to make sure schedules are really aligned correctly. And then we do it again in the spring, just before we start the second semester, to see if we need to make any movement for students last minute. So.
Awesome. Thank you, Tara, for sharing those. Thank you, Tara, for sharing those tips and tricks. Speaking for Abby King and Central Valley High School, her principal, Kyle Turner, they were able to increase their rates using what is called College Vine. Okay, College Vine is actually facilitated courses on their campus, facilitated community college classes on their campus. And this is how one school doubled the number of students prepared in 3 years. So speaking again, like I said, for Abby King, they use IGETC courses from Shasta Community College. Anything that's IGETC is A to G approved. And remember, for the state, they only care about, you could have CSU or UC data, not just UC, or you could have just CSU data. Very important. So they use the CSU data and IGETC community college classes that are taught on their campus. And they found that their students are more successful in those facilitated community college classes. They're more successful in there than they are in the AP classes. So want to give a shout out for this innovative way that the Central Valley High School, which has a high student population of low socioeconomic disadvantaged students, and they are rocking it. You saw their data. They have made tremendous improvements. So they use the college level courses, and they're taught by a teacher on campus. And again, give a shout out for IGETC that they are CSU transfer requirement ready. Here's an example of how they use those, and an example of the data, and showing 150% increase in college credits captured by their students. So thinking about the AP route, you only receive the credit at the college if you pass the AP test, as we all know. Many of their students felt overwhelmed by the AP workload, and this facilitated course approach allows students to switch from AP to the facilitated courses. And then we also know that third bullet there, the school counselors are cringing, because when students start out in AP, and then if they can't make it, if all the supports are integrated and they still can't make it, then we often have very large CP classes and very small AP classes. And they have found that this is not the situation with facilitated classes. So working on equity and being an equitable approach, they find facilitated classes to be much more productive. So in the 16-17 school year, using the AP courses compared to the college Vine courses, you can see they had 317 more duplicated credits. So 150%, very proud of them. Again, Kyle Turner, the principal, Abby King, director or department head for school counseling. You can see their improvement on the dashboard. They went from 34.1 to 56.9, which is heck of impressive, to 75% prepared. I'm beyond proud. I feel like I don't know. I'm just so proud of the work that they did at Central Valley High School. So Central Valley High School went from 34% prepared prior to College Vine and the facilitated classes to 75% within 3 years of implementation. Standing ovation right there for Central Valley High School. I like that they captured student voice. So as a student said, I feel more confident about going to college because I've already been doing it for 2 years. And I've gained a sense of what to expect in a college atmosphere and how to be responsible for my own education. That's huge. Very, very, very important. So, and then another one, College Vine gave me a better idea of what I want to do with my life. How rewarding would that be to receive those comments if you were Abby and Kyle and their staff that implemented facilitated community college classes. All right, well, I'm going to turn it back to Judy Flores real quick, and then I think Danielle is going to close us out.
All right. Well, as I mentioned before, you know, and you heard Becky say, she's all about making sure that we were celebrating every chance we could, and we were sharing every chance we could. And one of the things that was really powerful in that, as you go through any kind of award process, it really causes you to stop and put things in writing. that you may not have had in writing before, and what were the reasons why we got the results that we got. And so that was a really powerful process for all of the co-leads, because all of the co-leads were involved in helping us put that application together. And most of the co-leads went with us down to Southern California to receive the Golden Bell Award. So it was, we were only the second counseling program ever to receive the Golden Bell Award, and really excited about the opportunities it's given us to continue to share and continue to build on the work that we're doing.
Thank you so much, Judy, Becky, and Tara, for all of this. And I think everyone, we can do like a cheers or a applause for just this amazing work that they are sharing. I know we're just about at time. I'm going to share a couple more things. If you have to jump off, that's okay. But just a few other pieces. And I'll just say personally, I'm extremely passionate about this work. I just finished my doctorate in increasing equity in advanced coursework. And so a few additional tips I would just add is, one is really thinking about how, when you're looking at your data, to disaggregate it to better understand and intentionally support different student groups. So as an example on the next slide, when you're looking at your data and thinking about across the years, you know, on the left is what are all students A through G completion look like, and then where are how are our other student groups doing, and really trying to be thoughtful about the noticings we have, where there might be gaps, and how can we be really intentional about supporting the needs for this complex work, right? Because it's not always just adding more A through G aligned courses, but how can we be thoughtful about increasing certain student groups representation in those classes. The other piece I'll share is thinking about how to include family and student voice in this process, especially with increased equity. And so in my doctorate, one of the things I did was a lot of interviews with students. And I love that they shared some interviews with students about their experience with College Vine. And so students, if you on the next slide shared, one student talked about how he had moved from another country, and his counselor said, I'm a little nervous about you being in this IB class. And so kind of discouraged him from joining, and he actually did join, and now is a college student at a four-year university and thriving. And so another student talked about representation in her classes. And so really talking to kids love telling us and are really honest about that. So helping think about ways to include students both in getting their perspectives and families as well, and then being the solution. We had students that volunteered to be in these posters to highlight the diversity that, I am a first generation college goer. I am Hispanic or Latinx, and I'm really wanting to showcase the diversity in these classes. And so finally, I'll just share that as you're thinking about this work, again, it is really complex, right? And you need both technical and adaptive. Hatching Results does support with training and consultation. And I won't read through this whole piece, but just in terms of what I want to highlight is that whether you have professional learning from any type of professional learning, that is not, the only solution. We know that it is so much more complex when you're thinking about changing systems, supporting advising plans, analyzing transcripts, as you just saw. And so, just being really thoughtful in how this amazing gift that the state is giving us with funding, and how to be intentional about using this funding to address both technical and adaptive challenges within this work. And so I will just close by thanking you all. Thanks for joining us this Friday morning. If you have additional questions or anything you would like to ask, feel free to email me or Tara, because Tara's leading this work in Shasta, and I know she's gotten to share a lot of great pieces in the chat and answer some questions with you. So we thank you so much again, and hope you have a great weekend.